Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today over on my blog, I have a free layered stencil SVG cut file. And in this video, I want to share with you how to use it. So a while back, I was doodling and I created just some really simple fall designs. And I decided to go ahead and turn those fall designs into a little bit of a pattern. And then I made them a little bit smaller and created a stencil with them. But with that stencil, I wanted to be able to make individual pieces different colors. So I layered it up. And over on my blog, I have this layered SVG set that you can cut out with any of your electronic cutting machines. This is a 6x6 format that I cut them out in, but of course you can scale it up, you can scale it down, you can play with the dimensions. Just know it's going to change the way these images look and they won't be proportional. So I cut out each one of these with just some regular plain white cardstock. And once I got them cut out, I went ahead and labeled the top left corner of each one. You'll see my little marking right up there in the top left corner. And that is so as I layer these up, I can know that I'm fitting each one just right on top of the other one. And I'll line them up here and you can see each one just kind of overlaps in all those blank spots until you're left with a perfectly solid image, which is what we're going for. Now, something else I want to mention, when I am using these, I will be using these in my Misty, and that is simply because it gives me a right corner to line everything up in. Other things you can use are a literal ruler, like a right angled ruler. But a stamp positioner works great. You can also just use any sort of square mechanism that you might have lying around. Now with each one of these, I have also chosen all of my colors beforehand, and these are all the colors of distress inks that I will be using. And you can take a screenshot of this, but play around with different color combinations. You can use the same ones if you want. I'm going to mix it up and use a different color for each one of my little individual images, and these are all the different colors that I will be using. I like these mini distress inks just because I can get a wide range of colors for just a small amount of money, but any sort of ink will work for this. You don't have to use a distress ink. If you do not have them on hand, use whatever inks you might have on hand. Moving on, I will be working on a 6x6 sheet of cardstock, and I will hold this in place with a little bit of removable adhesive. This is just a removable adhesive tape runner. I'll go ahead and put a few strips of that on the back and then line this up inside my Misty to hold that in place. That Misty is there now just as a guide in case this were to shift, and it will give me a guide to bump up my stencil with. Now, if you don't have a right angle, you don't have a Misty, you can also just work on a 6x6 sheet of cardstock and line it up each time and tape it down with some painter's tape. That will work just as well. I will be holding mine down with a little bit of this. It's a painter's tape, but it is a light painter's tape. It's almost like a washi tape, if you will. I will leave it linked over on my Amazon storefront. That link will be down in the description box below. I'll go ahead and just use a few pieces to tape this just around those edges. I want to create almost a hinge, so I'm just taping on one side. This is going to allow me to pick up and drop down that stencil while keeping it in the same exact place. This way I can check the progress as I am going about and I am putting in my color or inking up this stencil. Now I'm starting off with my blue color and I'm using this little dauber tool to fill in all of my little berries. Now there are a range of tools that you can use for ink blending. There's the mini ink blending tool. There's all sorts of makeup brushes. I have a wide range of tools that I will be using in this video and that I like. I will leave those again linked over on my Amazon storefront page. A lot of them are great. They each have their own useful way of using them. It's all about what you like or what you have on hand. Another great thing is makeup sponges. Just very cheap from the dollar store makeup sponges. You can cut them up to be as small as you need. You can add a little paper clip on the end to kind of bunch them up, and that will give you a nice hand holding way of using them, or you can just use your fingers. That is a great cheap way to get into those very small places and cut down the size that you may need. So keep that in mind as you see me using these tools. Sometimes a makeup sponge will work just as well. Now, there is no right or wrong way to start with these stencils. I like to start with this layer first, though. This is my base layer. This is where all of my very colorful pieces will be, which is why I'm starting with them. This has the berries, all the different color leaves, the acorn body, the pumpkin body. So these are going to be my very vibrant, bright colors. So this is what I'm starting with. It's going to take me the longest. And here you can see me using that hinge that I created, just picking up and checking to make sure that I am getting good coverage. One thing about this, when you're cutting, I am using cardstock. That sometimes isn't the best stencil. You might want to use a little bit thinner cardstock for this. The thicker it is, the harder it is to get a nice crisp edge when you are stenciling. You can also buy stencil material. You can also use laminated sheets, just plain laminated sheets that you run through your laminator without anything in it. I will show in another video how I create stencils using that method. It does take a little bit of work with your Cricut to get them to cut, but it is a simple fix, and I have found a way to get mine to cut really well with that, and those hold up a little bit better. Now with cardstock stencils like I'm using here, you can use them a few times, but just know you won't get a lot of longevity out of them. So if you want these stencils around for a long time, I would suggest buying a stencil material and cutting it out with that. Cricut does make one. Again, I will leave some of those products linked over on my Amazon storefront page so you can check those out. I will be working kind of in groups for this, so I like to start off by coloring in all of one element. So I have my blue ink out. I'm using this dauber, so I'm going to color in all of those berries. Then I am going to move on and color in my next object. In this case, it's going to be the top of the mushroom, and I will be using a red ink. Now, some of these are closer together, so the best way I have found to do this is just to mask them off. And there are a few ways you can do this. So the first way I'm going to show you is by using some painter's tape. Now with this, you're putting it on top of the stencil, so you don't have to be too careful. If you do rip the stencil a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. And this works really well for those simple shapes, like the mushroom top is kind of a triangle. So I can just use 3 pieces and kind of mask that off with 3 different pieces of tape and create that triangle, and then just fill it in with this ink. And for this, I am actually using one of those makeup brushes I talked about. This works really well to fill those in. And then once I'm done filling that in, I can go ahead and very carefully move that triangle that I've created to the next object. So I'm just going to pick up all 3 pieces of tape at once just by pulling up kind of the first one I put down, and that keeps them all together. And I'll just move my triangle over to the next little mushroom top and use that same exact mask and fill in the next one. And that is one way to mask these out. And again, that works with the really simple shapes. And that is a great tool to have on hand for those quick masking elements. But some elements are a little bit more oddly shaped, or in the case of the pumpkin, which I will be doing next, it is a circle. That is not the easiest to mask out with painter's tape. So what I like to do is take a little extra sheet of paper. In this case, I am using just an old note card. I'm going to pop that under this stencil, and I'll use my pencil to trace out one of those pumpkins. Now, the great thing about this stencil, the pumpkins are all the same exact shape, so I can just cut one out And then you'll notice that I put that right in the center of that old note card. And I'm just going to cut slightly outside of the pencil line with a pair of scissors. Very quick and easy to do, but that gives me a little bit of wiggle room, so nothing needs to be perfectly aligned. Just very, very slightly outside that line gives me that little bit of wiggle room that I need. And then I've got this great little mask that I can pop over all of those little pumpkins and quickly fill them in with the orange ink. This is a great way to use or to mask out those oddly shaped pieces like those leaves, or in this case, a circle for the pumpkin. Very, very quick and easy to do. And of course, this works very quickly. I just hold it down with my fingers and then move it on to the next one and continue to fill them in with the inks that I am using. Now, this brush that I am using is exactly like the black one I was using before. It's just got a little bit bigger brush head on it. The only difference is these are colored brushes. So I have different colors for different inks. So in that case, I used the orange one for the orange ink. In this case, I am using the brown one for the brown ink. So each kind of color group, so your blues, your pinks, they all have their own color brush. So that way you're not contaminating different colors. And those are very cheap over on Amazon. Again, I will leave that link down in the description box below if you want to check those out. Now I did the same exact technique to mask out my little acorns, and on a different note card, of course, and I did the same thing with each one of my leaves. The leaves are very differently shaped, so this just helps kind of keep everything nice and coordinated and just very much in its own little space. So I'm not blending colors across the images. Now, one thing with the leaves, these do have veins up the center, which I have masked off with the stencil. However, they are a little bit easier to move, especially if you are using cardstock as your stencil. So what I like to do is come up from the edge or the end of the leaf where the veins start and just pull down to color it in. This way, those veins move as little as possible and you get those white, nice, crisp lines under those veins. So when you go to fill them in with your brown ink later, you don't have to try and cover up some of those darker color inks. Now I've used all these different colors. So I started off with blue on the berries, orange on the pumpkins, red on the mushroom caps or the mushroom heads. Then I did the acorns in brown, I did the leaves, the larger leaves in that burgundy color, and I am moving on to these little leaves with a nice bright yellow. And I will end this out with that final little leaf, and that is with this green colored ink. Now this particular leaf was actually a set of, I think, 3 on a branch. So what I did was I just traced that out and cut out kind of the same shape as the other leaves, but just making sure that I wasn't going into any of the other areas. So when I do go and I use this green ink, it's going to leave a little bit of a different shape on the actual stencil itself. It's still coloring in all the leaves I needed to color in and not letting me go outside of that, but it's just a little bit simpler shape to cut out for a very quick mask. Now with this, what I would do is I would save each one of these masks. So I keep these stencils in a little pouch and I just pop these masks right in with them so I don't have to cut them each and every time. Now you can also do this from the laminated sheets as well. That way you can save them and they last a little bit longer. But I find these little note cards do the trick just fine as well, and they last pretty long and they're nice and easy to make. Now this was the last color and this was the last kind of shape to fill in. So once I had all of these green leaves filled in, I could lift up my stencil and I had this wonderful pattern underneath. You can see the nice crisp edges that I get and it's just gorgeous. But we're not done yet because that is just the first layer of the stencil. So I'm going to very carefully remove that stencil and we're going to go on to layer 2. Now, the great thing about using that Misty, I can just leave that 6x6 sheet of paper in there and pop on that number 2 stencil. This is all the veins of the leaves, the stem of the mushroom itself, and I believe it's also the cap of the acorn. I'm making sure that that TL that I put on is in the top left because I want to make sure this lines up correctly. And I'm going back to those daubers and I'm just going to start filling in all of these little veins. Now the veins of the leaves I'm just doing very quickly in brown, and these nice little pointed daubers really do the trick in getting in those tight spaces. Again, this is just the tool that I used. Makeup sponges are great for this as well. There are a number of different tools that work for this. The Fantastics tool are fantastic for this as well. I will leave all of those products linked over on my Amazon storefront. But here quickly, I will show you those fantastic tools. These are fairly cheap as well, and they come in either a pointed tip or they come in a blunt tip. These are great to use as well, nice and quick and easy, and they are not very expensive. Another tool I like to use for precision and for pressing into these little tiny spaces are finger daubers. These are readily available even at craft stores. They're also pretty cheap, and you can buy these on Amazon, and again, readily available. These are also essentially these little plastic pieces that have a makeup sponge in them. You can find online how to make your own if you want to go that route as well. I am just using that finger dauber to really press in that ink to each one of those veins because this is such a small opening. Now I also went ahead and filled in all the acorn caps, and I'm also filling in all the little mushroom stems as well with different colors of ink. For each one, I'm using those distressings that I showed at the beginning. And for these, I'm just using those makeup brushes. I've shown these quite a few times on my YouTube channel. I have a video on a review of these actually that are very cheap Amazon makeup brushes, but they work great for ink blending. I will leave that linked in the top right hand corner, and again, these will be over on that supply list as well. And for this layer as well, I'm still utilizing that hinge on the right hand side. It is great to make sure that I have all those little areas filled in. I can continue to lift that up and place it back down as needed until I am happy with the results. Now look at that as I take that off. I absolutely love the way this comes together, but we're still not done yet. You can stop here if you want, but I am going to add these little bitty dots that just kind of fill in all those extra white spaces. This is our third and final layer, and this one is by far the easiest because I'm going to do it all in the same color. You can choose to do different colors if you want, but I'm going to use the very, very light antique linen, I believe is this distressing name, and I'm just going to very quickly fill in all of those little dots with this. Now, as I put this stencil down, I am making sure that I have my little top left indicator in that top left hand corner. I am utilizing a hinge on this one as well. These can be quite small, so I do want to make sure I get them filled in, but this layer isn't quite as important, but I can still pick it up and make sure I'm happy with the results. But that just adds that final little piece and fills in all those extra white spaces, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I love this pattern. It's so fun. Now, a few more things. I did this on white cardstock, but you don't have to. You can do it on cream. You can do it on tea-dyed cardstock. You can do it on craft cardstock. All of those different things that you can do this with to really create this gorgeous pattern and really play around with the results that you can get. Now we have this 6x6 piece of pattern paper essentially, and we can do what we want with it. I am going to use mine to create a card. And again, I am using 6x6. I like to start off with that, so I have a lot of different options. And I can also cut this down and get a few projects out of it. So I can get a card and a tag, or I can get a few tags out of it. I like to start off with bigger, because I can always cut it down later. So in this case, I am cutting it down to make a card. Now my card will be an A2 side folding card base that I will be using kind of horizontally, I guess you could say. And I will leave my card bases file that is ever so popular on my blog. Kind of explains all the different card sizes and card bases that you can make. I'll leave that linked in the top right hand corner and you can check that out. So I went ahead and cut out this thank you frame. I will leave this linked over on my blog as well for free. This is one that I just made very, very quickly and cut it out with my Cricut. I'll just leave it linked over for free as well, along with the SVG stencil because I'm using it and why not? So it'll be over there. You can download it too. I put a little bit of ink on it just to dirty it up a little bit to kind of fit with the fallish theme. I added some dimensional adhesive on the back and then I put this down directly onto that paper. This way I can use my scissors to cut out around it and I don't have to line anything up. I can get all the pieces that I want on there. I can make sure it's nice and even this way, and I don't have to worry about being perfect as I put it down onto the paper. This is just a little cheat way of doing things so you can get perfect alignment every single time. This is also a great way to make sure that I waste none of that paper that I spent so much time creating. So I use my scissors to just very, very quickly trim around that, and I will save all those little bits and pieces that I cut out to create more projects with them. But that is pretty much it. The last thing that is left to do is take this piece and add it onto the card base. And like I said, I'm using an A2 side folding card base that I will be using horizontally. I'm using my Misty to line it up, and I will just pop that right on top of the card base. Ever, ever, ever so simple. And I will make sure that that Misty tool, along with a few other positioners, are linked over on my Amazon storefront. These tools with the right edges come in so handy for so much more than stamp alignment. They come in great for layering stencils. They come in great for lining up your card bases as you're putting layers on them. So I will leave those linked as well over on that supply list. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Do not forget to head over to my blog for all those free resources on card bases, as well as the free layering stencil set and that thank you card front that I'll go ahead and throw in as well. Because I did use it, I'll go ahead and give it to you today too. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that now. Happy crafting!